Hi, all. This is Dr. David Branham. Welcome back. Today's video will be on American ideologies. Uh, for your test, I will provide the video along with the PowerPoint that I'm going to use in this presentation. So hopefully this will help you study in the way that you like and do well on the test. So let's get started. I'm going to share my screen and go to the American ideologies PowerPoint. I think I introduced myself. This is Dr. Branham. It's going to be a short PowerPoint video on ideologies, and it's just a good way for you as a students to understand about American ideology. I know everybody's heard about conservatives and liberals and so forth, but a lot of people don't have a good understanding of what that means. So this video is designed so that you can have that knowledge. Okay, the role of government. In government, you could have roles where governments are very powerful, and in most cases, when they're very powerful like that, the tendency is to be uh, oppressive to the people and so forth. So the first one is totalitarianism, and that's where government basically has unlimited power. And this occurred with Hitler during the Nazi regime in the 1930s and 40s. This also occurred with Stalin later when Russia became a communist country and really became really oppressive after World War II when there was isolation of Russia. Russia tried to isolate itself by creating the Soviet Union, which had a lot of countries like Ukraine into that bloc. And then they had an Eastern bloc in Europe, countries like Poland and Hungary, Romania, East Germany. Germany was split in half, and East Germany was part of the communist bloc that was controlled by Russia and their totalitarian government. So government in totalitarianism means the government basically owns everything. Government owns all the goods and services, all the property. It controls production. It decides what will be produced. It decides who will produce it, decides which jobs you'll have, and everybody, in most cases, gets the amount of money that the government says they should get. So that's a totalitarian government. In governments like this, you don't have the basic civil liberties that we understand as being something that should naturally come, such as the freedom of speech, freedom of religion. Oftentimes in totalitarian governments, there is no freedom of religion. That was the case in the Soviet Union and in Germany. So freedom of religion goes away, freedom of the press goes away. There will be no tolerance of a press that says anything bad about the government. Matter of fact, the government will own the press. So if the government owns everything, they own the media. They're going to control what you hear. So those are totalitarian governments. They're not democratic at all. People's vote really doesn't matter. Sometimes they have what you call these farce elections where you have one candidate on the ballot, or you're really only allowed to vote one way. And when the votes come in, if there is actually some kind of competition, that competition is thrown aside when the results are announced. So that's a totalitarian government. Anarchy on it is the complete opposite, where you basically have no government at all. If you remember the movies of cavemen, where there's really a survival of the fittest type of atmosphere, where all women are for themselves, and there's no government power to have any control, no safety, no ability to actually protect transactions. So you can't really have an economy. So those are the two extremes: totalitarianism, where government controls everything; anarchy, where there's basically no government at all. As I said, they're extremes. We don't have those types of governments normally in the world today. So we're going to look at the scale of socialism and capitalism, where socialism is closer to the government having total control, where the government owns the goods and services. There's usually a value for equality in the economic system. There's a when it comes to socialism, oftentimes when it comes to behavior, the government, they have wide range of behavior rules and so forth. But what it really comes down to with socialism is the government owns all the basic goods and services, and governments provide and allocates goods and services to the members of society. If it's a communist kind of system, communism basically says everybody's equal. The government owns everything, so there's equality for all. And the government decides which jobs you have, they decide how much money you make, decide where you're going to live, which car you're going to drive, what clothes you're going to wear, all of that. So it's closer to a totalitarian government, but socialist government isn't really a totalitarian government. It's just a government where the government owns most of the goods and services, and it has a lot more control over what's going on with the economy than you would have in a capitalist system, where individuals are the ones that owns goods and services. This is something we're used to in the United States. If you want to buy a house, you want to live in a house, you go and buy it. If you want to live in an apartment, you go and rent it. It's your choice. And once you rent that or buy that, it's yours. And if you rent it, it's under agreement that you will stay there because you paid for that. And there's a high value for privacy, a high value for keeping what you earn. Individuals are able to get the best job for themselves, make the money that they can make, maximize their profits, and have more power because they have more money. That's a capitalist society. In socialism, you won't have that power because the government has that power. So a person who makes a lot of money in a socialist system will end up giving a lot of that money to the government, and the government will control a lot of the spending and what things get spent on. A lot of times you have an equality value with the socialism. As a matter of fact, almost all of them have an equality value where if a person makes a lot of money and has a lot, they'll take that away and give it to people who don't have a lot. As resources become more abundant in society and the society becomes more civilized, government tends to move closer and closer to a socialist system. And in the United States, they say, we're a capitalist society. But the reality is there's a lot of people in the United States that give half of their income in taxes. I personally am very close to that, where half of my income is actually going to taxes. And you wonder, how could that be? Well, if the government is taking close to 30% of your money, you're only 20% there. And then if the state is taking 6, 7, or 8% on everything you buy, then all of a sudden you're up to 38%. And then they charge you a tax on all property that you own. You have all kinds of fees that you pay for service from the government. So in the end, a 50% tax is a good possibility, even in what we call the most capitalist society in the United States, which is the United States. So as resources become more abundant, like they are in the United States, we tend to move closer and closer to a socialism where people are there's more equality of income because they tax the rich and give more to the poor. And so, there is really no more pure capitalist system. Back before we had such abundance, back in the 20s and 30s, for instance, we had a very, very capitalistic system. I mean, we didn't have a government that, had the income tax. It did not exist. If people wanted things, they went to the store and bought it. If you wanted a doctor, there was no insurance provided to you by the government. There was no insurance provided by your employer. Basically, what you did was you went down and told the doctor you needed to see him, and then you paid that doctor a fee. That's how society worked before our abundance. But once we started to accumulate wealth, we became more and more socialistic. So in all honesty, when we talk about China being a communist country and the United States being a capitalist country, the reality is that both countries are very close economically. Their systems are very close. Both run a market system as far as buying goods and services, but the government takes a lot of what everybody makes and spends it the way they want. And that's how the world is actually starting to work. There's less and less gaps between the actual systems of the economies that are going on in the world. Arguments for socialism: one, labor in a market system becomes less and less valuable as it becomes more productive. For instance, if you were me, like you, I used to remember VCRs, where you could actually record things on TV. It's the first thing to come out in the late 70s. When VCRs come out, they had these tapes that you put in and you press record. You couldn't freeze it once you got your recording. You just record the show and then you had the tape. You couldn't freeze it, couldn't slow motion it, couldn't do anything special with it. Your tape was 2 hours long. You went over 2 hours, you had to get another tape in there and start recording again. They were very clunky, but they were the only thing people had to record TV. There was no DVDs, there was no streaming, none of that. The internet didn't even exist. Computers didn't exist, really, not personal computers. So when VCRs first come out, and there was an abundance of them, they were selling in the late 1970s. They were selling for over $2,000. It was a massive investment to get a very simple VCR. The VCR itself was huge, and it was very, as I said, it was very clunky. It didn't do what you would expect, in today's world as far as recording goes. Now, obviously, they've been defunct. But in short order, as you produce more and more of these VCRs, and they got better, and as time went by, where all of a sudden you can tape for 6 hours, and you have slow motion, and you have freeze, and you can set the timer to come on when you want it to. All that started coming in very quickly. And there was a massive production of VCRs. In short order, VCRs were $300. Went from $2,000 to $300. And a lot of people invested in them. And just a few years after that, they were less than $100. And it got, this was all before the technology basically made them obsolete. So at the end, you could get a VCR to tape what you wanted for $100 very easily. That's because in a market system, as things become more abundant, as you're able to produce more, as you're able to do better, prices go down, because in supply and demand, when you increase the supply and the quality of the supply, the demand is there, and the demand is kept up with. So when you first come out with something, there's a high demand for it, but there's only a few. So you can put a huge price tag on it. But once you start doing mass production, then those prices get lower. That means the people who are actually producing those VCRs aren't making as much money. The people who are putting them together are not making as much money. In a labor system, market system, the labor becomes less and less valuable as you become more and more productive. And so a lot of people who want socialism say, this is bad. Your labor should not be worth less because you're more efficient, and it's inefficient. So that's the reason why they believe that socialism, where the government has more control of what people get paid, is a good way to go. A second argument for socialism is the means of production or work help everyone in a collective society instead of only the aristocracy. So when we first started out with VCRs, only the aristocracy were getting to benefit from the original production of VCRs, because you had to pay $2,000. In the late 70s, $2,000 was a massive amount of money. So, and what were you really getting? You're just getting something that would record your TV show for 2 hours. A lot of people paid it, and they were of high value. So in this argument, they say that it shouldn't go just to the people who are rich. Once they're produced, they should go out equally to everyone. So, just because you don't have a lot of money doesn't mean you shouldn't have something. That's the argument for socialism that they make. The third argument is that it allows for more freedom because you're not actually constrained by owning property. And this is something that a lot of people don't comprehend very well. But if you read Walden by Henry David Thoreau, he goes into a lot of this, where he says the less property that you have, the more freedom you actually have. Because if you have property, you have to take care of it. You have responsibilities. I live in a subdivision where I have to make sure my grass is mowed. I have to make sure my house is in good shape. I have to make sure I have plants outside. I have to make sure the house is taken care of. If it needs repair, the air conditioning needs repair, I have to fix it, and so forth. All of that property that I own takes away from my freedom because I have a responsibility to keep it up. So the argument is that if you don't own the property, then you don't have this responsibility, and you have more freedom. Most people that I know are willing to own the property instead. But this is an argument that people make that says, okay, we should have socialism where the government owns things and not people. So theoretically, under this argument, if your air conditioning goes out, you call the government, say, come fix my air conditioning, and you don't have to worry about it. Problem is that we know how efficient government is, right? Government doesn't react very fast, especially when you don't have an incentive to react fast. In socialism, the government doesn't have an incentive to react faster because everybody pretty much gets the same. It's equal. So, it doesn't matter if you work fast or you work slow, still get the same thing. So that incentive goes away. So those are the arguments for socialism. Know what they are for the test. Arguments against socialism, I kind of went over some of them, but when everything is divided equally, there is no incentive for the individual to produce. And it was, as I talked about with the air condition, if you're a government air condition fixer and you're getting paid by the government, in socialism, you're going to get paid regardless if you fix fast or fix slow. People who don't work well, people who aren't talented, they get paid the same amount as people who are very talented. So when everything is divided equally, the people who have the ability to produce do not have the incentive to produce like they could. And so in a capitalist system, when people have the ability to produce and they have an incentive to produce because they're going to make profit from what they're doing, they will have that incentive to do it. And it helps everybody because the people who want or are demanding the goods these people can produce, these people with talent can produce, are going to get them faster, and they're going to get them at a cheaper price because of capitalism. So the argument against socialism is you want this market dynamic where people are rewarded for doing well, which will make them do well, which will make it where the supply for the country or the people in the community is better, and actually the prices actually go down. So that's one argument against socialism. Another argument is when the government owns all the property, how does it decide what to produce and how to produce without losing efficiency? In a capitalist society, the decision is made by the individuals. If you want it, you demand it, and you go to the store and you buy it. If it's too high of a price, then you go, okay, I'm passing that up. It's too high of a price, even though I want it. I'll wait till the price goes down. Will the price go down? In most cases, it will, because they'll produce more so they can get you the incentive to go and buy it. So, I mean, stores do this all the time where you put retail prices up. Everybody willing to go out and pay that retail price goes out and gets what they want. And then you have a supply left over, they put it on sale. Let's knock this price in half. Then you get the other people who come in and they are able to buy what they want. The market decides what is produced. The market does, not the government. If the government owns everything, they have to decide what price to put on everything, how much to produce. They're going to have to decide which color your shirt's going to be, how long your shorts are going to be. They're going to have to decide all these things, whether you're going to wear a dress, whether you're going to wear pants, whether you're going to wear a dress shirt, whether you're going to wear a t-shirt, what kind of shoes you're going to wear. The government has to make these decisions. And in most cases, it's an inefficient decision. The market makes efficient decisions because it works on supply and demand. If demand is high, supply goes up and people are rewarded accordingly. When government decides, it's almost always without efficiency. They don't make the right decisions. So this has gone on in China, where China decided to build a lot of middle-class housing, and there was not a demand for it. One, because the people who had more had better housing, and the people who had less couldn't afford the middle-class housing. So the government built a whole lot of houses that are just empty. And what they need to do is go ahead and lower the price and let the people in, but they don't want to do that because they'll lose a lot of money. They've lost the efficiency. They haven't looked at the real demand of the people that they have. So that is one argument against socialism as well. The third argument is how you're going to dole out the job. In America, you give the job to the best qualified person. That's the quote American way. Now I know there's times when it doesn't happen, and we put in laws like affirmative action, where affirmative action says that sometimes you don't give it to the best qualified person. Sometimes you give it to a nearly qualified person, so that you can add to diversity. But still, you don't just give out jobs to people who aren't qualified to do them. In a capitalist system, you give out jobs only to people who are qualified to do them, because if you don't, you'll go out of business. If you can't produce at a rate that you need to produce in order to make a profit, you will go out of business. So hiring people who can't do a job and giving them money will not work. So how do you dole out those jobs if you're a government in socialist society? What happens in most cases, you give people jobs that they're not qualified for. If you work for the government, I worked for the government for years. Matter of fact, UHD is operated as a state university. So there are times when it doesn't matter. I really haven't seen this at UHD a lot, but I did see it a lot in the city of Houston, where people would get promoted, every time, it's time to get an increase, they would get promoted, and they'll get promoted to their level of incompetence. This is something that's been studied in bureaucracy, where the tendency for governments is to just keep promoting people until they can't do the job. Then what do? So usually the reaction is, let's just change the job back to what they were doing before, but we'll call it the same job that they were promoted to. That's kind of the efficient way to do it. But the real efficient way is to make sure that everybody's qualified to do the job they are supposed to do, and they don't get promoted to a job where they're not qualified for it. So that's another argument against socialism. Arguments for capitalism. There's a lot of arguments for capitalism. If you want to know my bias is for capitalism. I believe that a market system is the best way to do an economy. And I understand that there are flaws in the market. And the market is not perfect by a long ways, but I think it's easier to adjust a market system than it is to go to full socialism and then try to do it from there. Arguments for capitalism: one, it maximizes economic growth. People who can produce have the incentive to produce as much as they can for profit. The people who demand have the ability to buy what they demand, often at a much lower price. So you think of like TV sets. TV sets now, you can buy a TV set very easily, a very nice TV set for $300. When I was a little boy, TV sets cost $300. And if you think of what $300 was back then, a half a century ago, how much money that was. And what happened was the TVs were perfected. They found out ways to make them better. They found out ways to make them cheaper. They found out ways to mass produce them, create a whole lot of TVs, put them all up and say, buy them. So it maximizes economic growth. A lot of people think, okay, there's a mentality for some people to say, okay, there's only so many dollars. Once you have those, if you don't have those, you need to get somebody else's. That's not how economies work. Economies grow by producing. If you have the ability to produce a lot, your economy will grow. And that's why capitalism is the best for economic growth. Also, it promotes freedom of individual wealth. If your goal in life is to become wealthy, you have that chance. In a socialistic system, you really don't. So it doesn't matter how hard you work, how well you invest, how good your decision making is. In a socialist system, you're just going to have the same. In a capitalist system, you have a chance to have a lot. And that is what makes for a big incentive to produce. So if you want individual wealth, now the people for socialism will say, why does that person deserve individual wealth when they have so much when people have so little? People for capitalism would argue that in most cases, people choose to have little because they don't make the right decisions, they don't work as hard, they don't do what they need to do to have a lot of money. It's part of their choice. That's the argument. Now, those arguments go back and forth, and we can keep going on those arguments forever, but that is both sides of it. Another argument for capitalism, it gives economic incentive to produce at high levels. Yes, the more you produce, the less you get per unit. That's the argument for socialism. But you never get to a point where you have negative incentive. You will always make more money with producing more. You're never going to make negative money for producing more. There does come a point when you don't need to produce anymore and you're not going to make a profit. At that point, you'll scale back. But you can produce and produce and produce at a massive rate and still keep making profit. If you have mass production and let's say those VCRs, you were making $1,000 a sale early on, but you weren't making many sales because there weren't many of them. If you can make 1,000 sales at $50 profit, 1,000 sales, that's $5,000 right there. So even though you have a lot, you're getting less per unit, you can still make more money because you have that technology. So you never get to the point where, okay, I don't want to produce because I'm not going to make any more, or you almost never get to that point. So that's the other argument for capitalism. It allows you to be a mass producer. The fourth argument is it allows the market to naturally determine the production of goods and services. You don't have to worry about the government deciding, okay, how much should we make? What kind of housing? How many houses should we build? How many cars should we make? So the market lets you know. You know how many people there are. You know how many people need a car. You produce them. Okay, if you don't want to make that, if you can't make the profit you want, you stop producing. If you can make more profit, even if it's a small profit, and you can mass produce, you make a lot of money off of each car sell. So the market naturally tells you how much to produce because demand will tell you. Demand is what determines supply in the market system. If you get to government with pencils and papers, they're never going to get there. The market naturally does it. It's called, Adam Smith called it the invisible hand. So the last argument goes dead against the last argument for socialism, which is property rights actually bring you freedom. They don't limit your freedom, they bring you freedom. You have privacy, you have interest. It gives you the ability to make money if you make property. You can make money off of it. You can live the kind of lifestyle that you like. That's what people would call real freedom if they're for capitalism. So, yes, property does limit your freedom, but it also increases your freedom. So those are the 5 arguments for capitalism. The role of government in society, therefore. So where are you on this? Are you a capitalist or are you a socialist? So we have dimensions here where we have a scale of freedom versus order. And this scale is a true scale with freedom being on one side, means you get to do whatever you want. Order being on the other side, where the government tells you what you should do. So social freedom, on that dimension of social issues, social freedom places a high value on individual liberties, even at the expense of having an orderly society. It says people should be free to do whatever they want to do. And this goes very deep with real true libertarian freedom on social issues. That means you should be able to take drugs if you want to take drugs. It means that you should be able to commit suicide if you want to commit suicide. Abortion, it's up to you. You can have abortions if you want. Everything is free, a free choice by the individuals. Now, the argument for order is, it places a high value on public stability, because when everybody just acts like they want, then we have a lot of loss of public stability. So, if people are taking drugs, people who take drugs are more likely to steal to make money to pay for those drugs. We've seen how drugs ruin lives. People for social order believe that it's a good idea to make these rules for people to protect themselves. It goes so far. Even I did a radio show recently where a person said that we need to stop having the free drink refills at the McDonald's machines because people were getting too much sugar and they didn't know what they were doing to themselves. And so people who for social freedom would say they should, we have the free fill ups. They should be able to fill up as many times as they want. If they want to drink 10 Cokes, they can drink 10 Cokes. It's up to them. The people for social order would say, no, we have to protect them from themselves. 1 Coke is enough. Matter of fact, 1 Coke may be too many. Let's stop these refills. So that's the difference between social freedom and social order. And so I would ask, where are you on this scale? People for social order want strong police departments. You're not going to get an argument to reduce the police among people who want social order. They want more police. They want an orderly society. They don't want people yelling and screaming in theaters and acting up and so forth, or going into public places and making a scene and so forth. They want people to be able to have a stable life. So they believe in having order or having rules that people should abide by. People for social freedom say, if you want to go yell, go yell. It's up to you. So where are you on that scale? So that's something to think about. Young people tend to be more for social freedom. The older people tend to be more for social order. There's usually a movement from freedom to order as life goes by. People get tired of people acting up and making, these things have what we call externalities. What you do affects other people. So if you're blaring your radio, people are bothered by that, and it makes people very uncomfortable, then maybe you shouldn't blare your radio. So that would be the argument there. Then there's the role of the government in the economy, where we have freedom versus equality. Economic freedom says individuals should be able to keep what they earn, use it as they wish, make as much money as you want without the government coming in and taking it away from you. This gives you the incentive to produce. Your ability to produce and your talent to produce makes all of our lives better, because what you produce are things that we need. If you're producing things that we don't need, you're not going to make any money off of that. So you make those decisions. What can I produce that will have a profit for me and will help society? Economic equality, people who are for economic equality, those individuals say, if you're well off, you need to give what you have to somebody else who isn't well off. There's too many people suffering in the United States. And I used to, when I had a class at UHD, since this is an online class, we're not face to face, but when I had a class at UHD face to face, I always wanted those classrooms, that 629, 627, 625 over there in the academic building, which had a window out to downtown Houston, because this gave me a perfect opportunity on this part of my lecture that economic freedom, if you want to see the benefits of economic freedom, I opened up that window and I said, look up, and you see the high rises, and you see all the buildings out there, and you see the massive amount of technology, the production, you look down the street, it's beautiful cars, awesomeness. That's economic freedom. Then I say, okay, if you want to see the problem and the reason why people want economic equality, look down. And you look down into the bayou and you see people that are homeless. You have people that are sick. People don't have anything. People who are cold that don't have a coat. People that don't have anywhere to go. They're looking for something to eat. They're looking for anything they can do to get through the day. So people who are for economic equality are looking down saying, we need to take care of those people. People who are for economic freedom are looking up and looking on the street saying, look at the buildings, look at the roads, look at what we can produce. Let's have that. So I ask where you are. Now you don't have to have all of one or all of the other. You can be in between, and most people are in between. But that's a good example of the role of government in the economy. Where do you want the role of government to be? How much tax do you want people to have to endure? I mean, the 50% tax that some people have in this country is the lowest in the world. So governments economic equality is big. And now I say it's the lowest in the world. It's the lowest in the world among economically well-off countries. So that's something you need to ask yourself on ideology. So ideology in America is two-dimensional. Economic issues, social issues. So on economic issues, you see that L and that C, right? That L and that C, that's liberal and conservative. On economic issues, are you more towards that totalitarian side or more towards that anarchy side? And I put that L and that C a long ways from the T and the A, because the T is a long ways from where most liberals are. Most liberals do not want you to take everybody's money and let the government make all the economic decisions, decide where you're going to live, what car you're in. Most liberals just want a little more equality as far as economics goes. Conservatives are a long way from anarchy when it comes to economic issues. So that C is a long way from the A, but it's closer to the A than the L. Anarchy, I mean, with conservatives, they don't want government intervention into what you're making and how much money you make and what you want to buy and so forth. Now, most conservatives are more than happy to let the government take taxes to protect their property, to protect their economic transactions, to protect their borders. Most conservatives are more than happy to economically pay taxes to keep those things, because that's what's important in keeping a real market economy going. You have to have protection by the military from other countries coming in. You have to have protection for your transactions. You have to have the ability to make a transaction without somebody stealing it from you. You need to have those things. So conservatives are more than happy to pay taxes for those things, but they're not happy to pay taxes so that you can give that money to somebody who isn't working hard, so to speak, right? So that's the argument that they'll make. So economic issues, liberals are a little closer to that totalitarian side. Let the government intervene. Conservatives a little closer to the anarchy side, but none of them are really close to the T or the A. Neither one. On social issues, you can see at the bottom, I got the T and the A on opposite sides because liberals are closer to the A. You should be able to act how you want. Now, liberals aren't so close to the A that they want complete anarchy, because complete anarchy means that you can be a criminal if you want, everything for themselves. Your freedom to act as you wish cannot impose itself on other people's freedom to act as they wish or their privacy. So, I mean, you don't get to invade somebody's house. You don't get to attack somebody, assault people. You don't get to do those things. That cannot be part of your behavior. But things like you going out and wanting to take drugs without it interfering with anybody else's life, most liberals are okay with that. Conservatives, they're on that other side, closer to that totalitarian side, but they're not completely totalitarian. They don't want the police stopping you at every step and making sure that you're not, doing what the government wants you to do. They just want some rules to keep stability. So the C is a long way from the T on social issues. The L is a long way from the A on social issues. Most people are in the center of, in between anarchy and totalitarianism. But those are the two dimensions of American ideology. So I got the two-dimensional ideology here: freedom versus order for social issues, where liberals are for freedom, conservatives are for order; equality versus efficiency when it comes to economic issues. Liberals are for social welfare programs, things to help people get on their feet, even if that means taxing the rich. People who are for a market efficiency are for a free market. They don't want the government coming in and taking their money away just to give it to somebody else. Transfers are something they don't really like. So, you have this equality versus efficiency dynamic that goes on with economics. Arthur Oken wrote a book called Equality versus Efficiency. It was about decision making. Like every time the government comes in and takes your money, they don't spend it efficiently because the market isn't making that decision. So that's something that you want to think about when it comes to whether or not you want to tax people and change and move money around that other people make. So that's the basic two-dimensional ideology that we have in this country. It's often the case that the dimensions are not consistent with one another. In other words, if a person values social freedom, they will not necessarily value equality also. So just because you're conservative on economics doesn't mean you're conservative on social issues. Well, let's talk about that. Okay. Conservatives have a high value for social order and economic freedom and efficiency, but liberals have a high value for social freedom and economic equality. So on social issues, conservatives are for government intervention, On economic issues, conservatives are for government not intervening. Liberals believe that government should intervene on those economic things, should not intervene on those social issues. Then you have the libertarians, who you could kind of tell from the name that they have. Liberty means freedom. So if you're for freedom, what are you for? Well, when it comes to the economy, they're for freedom to keep their money, freedom to be rich, freedom to buy what they want with the money they have, freedom to keep what they have. When it comes to social issues, they're for freedom, freedom to do what you want. So libertarians are at odds. Now, they're at odds with conservatives when it comes to social issues. Libertarians are also at odds with liberals when it comes to economic issues. So libertarians are that freedom party. It's not anarchy, just like I said. I mean, before, well, on the anarchy scale, libertarians are for a good defense department, a good police department, the ability to make their transactions. They are for government to do that. So they don't mind paying taxes on that level, but they're certainly not for allowing allowing the government to take their money and give it to somebody else. They're certainly not for making laws that really restrict your ability to do what you would like to do. So, as I said, it's not anarchy. It's not where they want to get rid of government altogether. Doesn't mean they want to get rid of police. Doesn't mean they want to get rid of the military. It's just that they are closer to the freedom side on both sides of the dimension. Communitarians are closer, are more for social order and economic equality. Now, you don't hear the word communitarians very much. There's not a party called communitarians. Libertarians have their own party. They have a political party. It's a third party. It's not very viable. Almost all libertarians, who really want to get elected, end up going to Republicans or Democrats. And in most cases, they go to Republicans historically, because Republicans are pretty receptive to people who are anti-tax. So most of the time, libertarians will go to the Republicans, kind of fight them on that abortion issue, kind of fight them on those drugs restrictions, all that stuff. It's a little easier fight on social issues than when it comes to money. So, but libertarians have their own party. It won't be viable in the American system. It's just not. There's no way to do it. The only way you could transform the parties would be to have something like a libertarian and a communitarian party. That's not going to happen in our lifetime. We're not going to be able to do that. We may have a third party, but our system, as you know from political parties, our system calls for two parties, not three. So in order for a new party to come in, they have to wipe out another one. And that's not going to be an easy task. The only way it could possibly happen would be to elect a third party president, and then that third party president start forging a government that has people from his party or her party in the Congress, and then spreading out to the rest of the country. That could happen. It would take probably a decade for it to happen, and would have to be a real movement, a real hatred of one of the other two parties. Now, it happened with slavery because the Whigs and the Democrats couldn't take a stand on slavery. You had pro-slavery, anti-slavery on both sides. So when the Republicans come in, the Republicans under Lincoln, they said, we are anti-slave. And then everybody else pretty much disintegrated around them because their anti-slave message, especially in the North, was very powerful. So they were able to wipe out the Whigs. They were able to wipe out what was the Democratic Party, and they basically ruled very strongly for the next 75 years. So that could happen, but you're going to have that issue like slavery that will really knock over this party system that we have. So that's the only way it will end up happening. So just like libertarians are not anarchists, communitarians aren't really totalitarian. They just want social order. They want a lot more equality in the economy. And so those two ideologies are more consistent in that one is for order, order and equality. Libertarians are for freedom, and that's kind of more consistent than you'll get, for liberals and conservatives who are for freedom one time and then against freedom on the other. So that's the 4 American ideologies that we have in this country. I want to thank you for this. This is hopefully this will help you understand ideology a little bit better, give you a good idea. When you receive the political parties part of the video on political parties, you'll see that Republicans are the conservative ones, Democrats are the liberal ones, and you can really see on issues where they stand pretty strongly. I want to thank you for the video. I'm going to stop sharing now and say if you have any questions, please let me know. You have my email. I'm happy to meet with you. If not, I will wish you well in the test and have a great day.